Hey guys, welcome to my beginner Python tutorials. I'm going to try to keep the videos between 5 and 15 minutes because I want to get straight to the point, explain what it is exactly that you can expect from the topic that I'm going over, and then just go kind of experiment on your own. I don't want to get too crazy with like underlying mechanics of how it may or may not work, just because that could be a little too in depth for just kind of getting into programming initially. And I think if you can just kind of know what things do versus why things are, it'll be much more functional as you start. When you are a little bit more experienced with it, then you can start going into the whys, and then it'll really like push your understanding of the language further. This video is about if statements. If statements are used all the time. Unlike some languages, if statements are really the only way to check a condition and then do something about it. Some other languages have like switch statements and other things like that, but Python doesn't have that. So you will be using if statements everywhere. So one thing to note with if statements is there's like a couple different ways you can go about them. For example, you could use if or elif, which is like an else if, and you can have an else, or you could do multiple ifs, and also that an else statement or an elif is not required. I could just check if something is, and if it isn't, then the code moves on. Nothing else happens from it. The else is going to run if any of the conditions are not met. That could actually be a detriment. You don't always need, you might not want to have an else statement in many cases. In a lot of my code, I don't actually have an else statement. I just check if a condition is met. If it is, do something. If not, move on. All right, so the first statement function I have here is showing basically how the if, elif, and else operate normally. So if you notice, I'm setting a number to 9, and then I'm saying if the number is less than 10, which it is, print less than 10. I'm saying elif, the number is less than 20, print less than 20, else print something else, right? So the first if and elif, both of those conditions are met. But because I'm using if and an elif, I am basically telling the code to match the first condition and then skip everything else. So that's what's going to happen. When I run this code, it's going to check and see if these conditions are met. It's going to see that the if statement meets the condition, and then it's going to move on. So all we'll see is print less than 10. Oh, and I already ran it so you could see that. So there we go, less than 10. That one's pretty straightforward. If you don't want multiple conditions to be, code executed on them, then this is what you want. You want ifs, elifs, and elses. Make sure you have it say elif, or else you'll have some weird things going on, and I'll show that a little bit later. The next one is showing basically the same thing, except for none of the two, the if or the elif, are met, and the else is going to be evaluated. It's going to say, is number less than 10? No. Is number less than 20? No. Okay, do else. So let me get that running. There we go. So this is very powerful because you might not know all of the outcomes or conditions that will be like possible when you're doing some code. So you could basically say, I expect some things to happen, and if they don't, maybe that's bad. Maybe you only want what you're looking for to happen. If they don't happen, you can raise an exception or an error or note to the user, hey, something bad happened and we weren't expecting that. So it's kind of a way to catch things that may be unexpected. In many cases, though, you want to still do something with it, because you could just say, if it's less than 10, else. You don't have to say, if it's less than 10, elif, it's greater than 10. So it's kind of just a shorthand for that. The third condition is me evaluating multiple ifs. So multiple ifs are really interesting because the way you should look at this is not that it's one set of conditions, it's actually two sets of conditions. I'm doing two if statements. It's not one multiple if statement. So you have to be very careful when you're writing code. If you do multiple ifs, you're gonna be evaluating all of those ifs. And so you will see when I run this that both of those conditions, since they're true, will be met, and we'll get both of the prints. There it is. So I had the number equal to 21, so basically the else hit it again. When I lowered the number to be 9, now both of the conditions are being met, just like I was saying. So this is really powerful too, because you might want both or two things to happen if the condition is met. Normally you could do two actions in one if, but maybe there's two possible things you need to do, but it's on two specifically different conditions, and sometimes there's an overlap. Like, what if the number was 11, only the 20 would be hit, the 10 wouldn't. So that's a case where, having the multiple ifs isn't guaranteeing to do both, because there's still plenty of conditions where only the 20 will be met. And then anything 21 and above would be hitting the else. The last thing isn't really to do with if statements, but I wanted to show it because it's to do with else. I think it's not really a common thing that people know about, but in for loops, there is an else statement. And basically what the else is doing is saying that the for loop ended normally. So if the for loop was interrupted for some reason, then the else would not be hit. And so when I run this code, right now I have a break in there. So we should see loop break on condition, and then we'll just see end of for loop. So the number reached 9, number equaled 9, so it did a break, and the else is like, okay, well it was broken before it was done. I'm going to I'm not going to meet that else. If I change this number to 11, that will not be met, so we won't break the loop, and the else should be doing the code that's under it. So loop ended normally. I don't use this a whole lot, but it's useful in many cases. And just for an example, one case that I'm using it in is on a DHCP server. There's a range of IPs that I have that can hand out. So I'm looking over those IPs to look for an available one, and when I find an available one, I give it to the computer. If the for loop ends, basically it means that there is no available IPs. So I have an else that says, hey, log the fact that there's no available IPs, and the administrator needs to take care of that. So there's plenty of reasons why you'd want to use that, but I wouldn't try to always have that there, only if you really think you need it, because you many times can get blinded by the fact that's there and you don't even need an else. You could simply do it after the for loop, like how I'm printing end of loop. So keep that in mind, but definitely mess around with it, because you can use that to your advantage, like in my case for kind of logging a problem. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. It'll let me know whether I should be making more of this stuff or not. Also in the description, I'll have some links to things like my Twitch channel where I program live, as well as do network security stuff, pen testing, things like that. My notify.me, and any information related to like the operating system I use, text editor, and all that good stuff. Take it easy.